Hello, everyone, and welcome to all participants joining us today. My name is Jessie Glicker from the Buildings Performance Institute based in Brussels. Over the next 50 minutes, we will discuss which practical means exist to achieve better energy efficiency, in particular, looking at Central Asia. Today, we are joined by an interesting group of panelists to discuss energy efficiency policies and impacts. We have, and I apologize for any mispronunciations, Joy Guy she's the Asia Pacific Program Head from World Green Building Council, Paul Kellett, the Program Manager at United for Efficiency at UNEP, Sasha Antonenko, he's the Head of Energy Efficiency at the Energy Charter Secretariat, Yerlan Romanazov, the Regional Head of Kazakhstan for EBRD, and Jeswynn Yogaratnam, the Head of Policy Reform from Global Buildings Performance Network at Monash University. So welcome and thank you all for joining us. To start the session, I would like to ask all of you to give us a brief opening statement. Please stick to a little under 3 minutes if possible, on your work and why energy efficiency measures are so important to us. As mentioned, our session is less than an hour, so we will stay brief. We will have time for Q&A. So please, participants, feel free to write in your Q&A questions and the speakers can respond. And I will start with the order I introduced you in. So Joy, you have the floor.
Thank you, Jess. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for having me with you today. And my name is Joy, Asia Pacific Programs Head from World Green Building Council. I'm also the founder of Joy of Sustainability, focusing on sustainability consulting with positive psychology. So I would like to point back to the COP26, which just ended a while ago. It gave us a lot of takeaways and points of reflections. So there is indeed disappointment in the level of ambition it arrived at. There are also hope and empowerment we walk away with, encouraging the industry to take a bolder and more ambitious approach. So there will be financial support and resources start to slowly flow to regions like Asia and Africa. What we really need now is really to have ourselves be more ready for this beautiful and ambitious movement. In the Asia Pacific region, World Green Building Council's main goal in 2021 was to develop a net zero readiness framework, supporting the industry to be more ready and more confident in achieving net zero. So here I'm stretching the goal a little bit further beyond the energy efficiency, but rather net zero itself, which is the ultimate end goal we are aiming for. So this framework covers 5 main categories: government leadership, technical solutions and their approaches, finance, data, and mindset. So these are all the things I think in terms of advancing net zero and energy efficiency, these are the things we are supposed to cover. So under each category, we'll also further expand to performance goals and indicators to support the market needs. So we also use this framework to gather industry feedback and learn that what are the challenges and also the to-do list. So I'm here to wrap up my opening statement with 3 top to-do lists that we have summarized so far. The first one is to have a net zero benchmarking and targeting setting tool. The second thing is to have a national carbon emission target and roadmap. And the third one is to have a clear definition of net zero. So I will pause here and move to the next one. Thank you, Jessie.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joy. That was perfect. I will now move on to Paul Kellett.
Great. Thanks very much, Jessie. And our thanks from the United Nations Environment Programme to the Asian Development Bank and the Investment Forum partners. Just by way of brief introduction to United for Efficiency, we're supporting countries to save 20% of their electricity. We're accelerating the global transition to much more energy efficient lighting and appliance technologies. And we strengthen country capacities around the world, as well as ensuring environmentally sound management practices. We build synergies among stakeholders, we share knowledge and information, and we help create strategic policy and regulatory frameworks to help address technical and quality issues across more than 40 countries in all global regions. So we tackle the 5 products that use more than half of all global electricity. These are electric motors, lighting systems, refrigerators, air conditioners, power distribution transformers. And we're a global public-private partnership led by ourselves at the UN and are funded by the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund, the Clean Cooling Collaborative, and national governments. So a variety of funders. We support the UN Secretary General's Sustainable Energy for All initiative, which is to double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency by providing assistance to developing and emerging economies to move their markets fully to more energy efficient lighting appliances and equipment. So the largest greenhouse gas reductions to get to the 2 degrees need to come from the end use energy efficiency, and electricity is the largest greenhouse gas emissions sector. So billions of new appliances, lighting, motors, as well as power distribution transformers will be added to the Central Asian stock over the next 10 years, and indeed every 10 years. So this increases electricity demand rapidly. And these are the 5 products that use more than half of all electricity. So they're really important, as I mentioned. So as a result, we need to use much more energy efficient appliances. And if we do, we can completely limit electricity demand, and we can avoid the need to construct more than 400 new large power plants in the region over the next 20 years. So this is a $1 trillion capital cost saving for the region, which is available. And we can save all consumers more than 100 billion annually with more energy efficient and environmentally friendly appliances. And without much more energy efficiency in the region, the electricity consumption for cooling appliances alone will double by 2040. So United for Efficiency is supporting more than 40 countries globally with full electrical appliance market transformation programs. And we're very happy to support the countries in the region to make the switch to eco-efficient lighting, refrigerators, air conditioners, and electrical equipment. And we use a proven integrated policy approach across all our market transformation programs and our technology procurement programs. And this has 5 parts. So this is minimum energy performance standards, labeling, market monitoring, verification, enforcement, financing and incentive mechanisms, as well as environmentally sound management. And we need to deliver our programs and unlock the billions in private sector investment in conjunction with our partners, which include the largest global electrical product manufacturers and the world's leading experts on appliance technologies. And effective progressive regulatory frameworks are key. So we're very happy to support the Asian Development Bank activities on energy efficiency across the region. Our country savings assessments for each country in the region are on our website at unitedforefficiency.org. And we are very happy to contribute to the 2021 Energy Investment Forum. So back to you, Jessie. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much for that. I will now move on to Sasha Antonenko.
Thank you, Jessica. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I represent the Energy Charter Secretariat, and we have a long history of cooperation with the CAREC countries. So over the last years, we have provided assistance to Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan on the development of the in-depth energy efficiency reviews. And we have also assisted Azerbaijan, which is currently the chair of this forum, on the development of the new energy efficiency law and the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan. However, during my short intervention, I would rather like to connect the recent adoption of the energy efficiency law by Azerbaijan with 2 other important events. The first one is the launch of the 40 billion project of Southern Gas Corridor, which is currently delivers about 10 billion cubic meters of natural gas to Europe. And the second one is the recent surge of global energy prices, which is currently a big issue for many countries. So why does energy efficiency become so crucial for Azerbaijan, especially now? The answer is very simple. The natural gas savings as a result of energy efficiency measures can become a reliable source for up to 40% of Azerbaijan's export to Europe. Another example can be drawn from our recent cooperation with Uzbek government on the development of the in-depth energy efficiency review. According to the results of our study, the economically viable and not technical, but economically viable energy efficiency potential in energy sector only is estimated at the level of 17 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year. And taking into account the country's significant, and I would say underused potential for energy export, the achieved savings can contribute also to the multiple benefit of the country, like the attraction of new technologies, investments, creation of jobs, and maybe, just coming back to Azerbaijan, for which we have also helped to develop the National Energy Efficiency Action Plan. So the implementation of this plan also has number of multiple benefits. Like I've already mentioned, the saving up to 4 billion cubic meters of natural gas per year, increase export revenue by $1 billion US, and of course, new investments. We have calculated the implementation of the measures proposed in the action plan could lead up to 3 billion new investments in the energy efficiency technologies. And last but not least is the creation of jobs. So the implementation of the action plan can, just help the country to create 120,000 new jobs. So my opening statement is very straightforward, that under the current circumstances, the potential energy savings and multiple benefits can provide even higher value for the Central Asian and wider CAREC countries. So thank you, Jessica, just over to you.
Thank you very much for that. That was a great introduction, and I'm glad you mentioned the current issue of global energy prices. Energy efficiency certainly feeds in well to this conversation, and hopefully we'll get to discuss a little bit more in detail later on this morning. And now I will turn it over to Jeswynn Yogaratnam. Welcome.
Thanks a lot, Jessica, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. It's my pleasure being here. And first of all, thank you to ADB and all the organizing team for this event. From my side, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that following the COP26 conference in Glasgow, there are very few doubters that the only option for our planet is to go green. And we, as a financial institution, we have the capital and financial strengths in order to support this transition. However, urgent action is required from every single country to keep global warming at the bay and limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. I would like to say that the role of Central Asian countries is also high, and it's great to see that united presence and presentation from Central Asian countries in Glasgow. On this basis, I would like to focus on a few points. First, I would like to echo what Joy has said regarding the importance of long-term strategy. That Glasgow conference has showed the evidence that long-term strategies of the countries to achieve carbon neutrality by mid-century are necessary documents providing a vision and setting development plan. Then this plan becomes a path guiding industries and economies, including on energy efficiency. Second, energy is one of the key building blocks, and it is clear that on the supply side, we are focused on development of higher efficiency solutions and technologies, on development of renewable energy sources and carbon neutral fuels like green hydrogen, for example. We see that there is certain success in the region with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, for example, increasing their renewables share in the energy supply. Third, the demand side management is equally important in this equation. And energy efficiency is playing the key role here. Addressing climate change and environmental degradation on the municipal level is equally urgent. Cities worldwide are the source of at least 3/4 of emissions, and it's also true in the cities of Central Asia. Obsolete urban infrastructure, which is suffering from decades of underinvestment and often degrading the quality of life of people, increasing greenhouse gas emissions, and preventing communities from adapting to climate change. And the fourth one, emissions trading systems, is playing an important role across the sectors, and it would have the highest impact across the sectors, would allow also to monetize and to make bankable the energy efficiency solutions. And from this perspective, I would also like to know the CBAM, which is being introduced in the United Nations. So let me stop here saying that we as CBRD were quite active along all these kind of points, and we are supporting development of long-term strategies, low carbon pathways in the sectoral, at the sectoral level, for example, in Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, supporting renewables energies. And I'm really looking forward to listening, to learning from yourselves in order for us to use in our daily action in order to further support this development in Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeswynn. That was a great introduction as well. I think it'll definitely be very interesting to hear some best practices throughout the day and see what policy measures can be implemented throughout the region. So now I will turn it over to our final speaker, Jeswynn Yogaratnam. Welcome.
Hi, good day from Australia. I'm Jeswynn Yogaratnam from Global Buildings Performance Network based at Monash University. First of all, just a shout out to the Correct Energy Investment Forum organizers. Well done in getting this together. And also just to acknowledge that I'm streaming here from the Aboriginal country of the Kulin Nation in Australia. Also just to acknowledge just recently in relation to COP26, as noted by all the presenters here, President of ADB, Akasawa, made a very significant contribution in terms of the climate mitigation and finance by the ETM, the emission trading mechanism. Now, this context in relation to energy efficiency measures is of great significance. Great significance because it changes the narrative in terms of how we then move on to consider the energy efficiency measures that we're talking about here today. And on that note, changing of narrative is pretty much the business of what we do here at GBPN. We're very interested in changing the narrative in the context of how the energy measures are implemented, but also more than that, the pre-implementation processes. So at GBPN, we are very interested in terms of developing strategy from a bottom-up perspective. And I'm really pleased that all the other presenters here are highly technical, and perhaps that's my point of difference. I come from a policy reform perspective and interested in terms of how some of the intersections of the interdisciplinary aspects can work together with the technical in relation to energy performance. So we are clearly in the business of energy performance of buildings, but we also are aware how the energy reform in itself has a great potential to play in terms of making a difference overall. In GBPN, we've got seven policy strategies, if you want, in terms of how we like to work in the context of changing this narrative and making a difference. Now, people are important in the context of this change. And at GBPN, we believe that in order to sort of enable this change to happen, that change of behavior to a core benefits approach is imperative in relation to the end result. Because as we are very much aware, incentives are there, but whether the change behavior in relation to the incentives are actually happening is another thing altogether, which goes on to our second strength, which is data-driven imperatives. So we are very interested in the business of data-driven imperatives and the database modeling. And of course, we are very much aware of the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 in terms of that sort of data that's required from the carbon footprint. But we really are also interested in collecting data at that very local level in order to integrate with what the national policies are. Because at the end of the day, there has to be a holistic and cohesive whole when you're trying to improve energy efficiency. So the integration is key. Also, then the capability and the education that goes towards this very important energy efficiency measures that we're trying to implement. I note that I'm just over 3 minutes, so I'll pause there and take on further discussion as the proceedings follow through. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So I'm very excited to jump right into the questions. So now just taking a local look at the moment. Joy, I'll turn it over to you and ask, what are some of the most effective energy efficiency measures you've seen implemented in your region?
Thank you for asking. So we have encountered quite a lot of projects in Asia Pacific region, especially under the umbrella of advancing net zero. So, and we start to realize that most of the best practice are seen as they are passively designed and they are fully integrated with nature. And they also have a very optimized way of operating the building. So in the way like we see biophilic design, we see nature integrated design, we see passive design that they're stretched to the limit. That just now in the opening speech, they already say the cheapest energy is what you have saved today. So that's why we wanted to emphasize that the most effective energy measure that we see is what the energy and also the demand are taken by the nature. So also taking the opportunity that we have 2 projects, we already got the APN award. One is the Pyramid Factory in the forest in Malaysia. There's also another one called Taiwan Campus in Hong Kong. So they are also the beautiful demonstration of how nature can embrace the building. Thank you.
Excellent. I think it's a very good reminder, the role that nature plays in all of this and how it really should be informing our decisions, because sometimes the conversation can get very far away from the environmental impacts. So it's a nice grounding reminder. So from that, I'll take a more global look. And Paul, I'll turn it over to you in terms of what best practices have you seen in other countries, other parts of the world that serve as good examples for successful energy efficiency programs?
Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, we have many good examples of successful energy efficiency programs across the range of countries that we support, from Latin America, including our country projects in Chile and Brazil, Costa Rica on energy efficient appliances and lighting, and diverse countries in Africa, Morocco, Rwanda, Cote d'Ivoire, and right across to Turkey, Pakistan, Thailand, Indonesia. So we have a lot of good examples, and some of the best practices that we've seen is you need to take a strategic 5-year integrated policy approach. So these policy approach programs really work. There are standards, labeling, green public procurement, and market-based incentives work. But only if they're based on a planned, strategic, integrated approach to market transformation. So dedicated strategic programs focused over 5 to 10 years, because it takes 5 to 10 years to transform markets. And these are necessary for successful, sustained market transformation. And you also need to involve the stakeholders. Really need to involve all of the stakeholders in the country, right across the grouping from government to the manufacturers, to the consumer stakeholders. And you need to focus on the consumer market. This is where the purchases are being made of these billions of appliances that I mentioned. So technology matters. The large savings are available from modern appliance technologies, and often much more than realized or appreciated initially. There really are huge savings from what look like simple programs. So that's one thing on technology, but definitely, as Jess mentioned, policy and political support also matters equally. You need clear information and education for the decision makers on the benefits, particularly. So once the benefits of energy efficiency programs are more fully appreciated, then you get the necessary political support and institutional support. A couple of other quick ones. Energy efficiency programs are low cost. They benefit all consumers and are relatively fast to implement. Regional experience sharing also helps a lot. Regional support on policies and programs helps to accelerate the market transformation. I think a biggest first approach, a priority step-by-step approach also works. The biggest first approach to programs in terms of cost saving helps to get the focus on the benefits and maybe the resources needed to widen the program out to other appliances, equipment, to buildings and what have you. I have to say, just from our experience in the region, we also found that public procurement of higher performance equipment has been something that's worked very effectively. For example, the government of Pakistan has a 3-star energy efficiency rating for purchasing of street lighting, for example. So the procurement ministries and finance ministries are key players in any program, and they're often very large purchasers of inefficient lighting and inefficient appliances and inefficient equipment. So ideally, governments should purchase the top performing products in the market. And if they have the right information and the right programs in place, they can really do that, So just to share a couple of best practices that we see across the regions.
Thank you. That's very useful. It's hard to take note of all of them, and it's very inspiring to hear that there are a plethora of options and best practices to look at globally. So thank you for that. So I'll move on now from looking at these programs to implementation of programs. So I'll start with Jess. What are the first things needed to create energy policy and a social environment to implement energy efficiency measures?
Thanks, Jess. That's a really interesting question. And I think in answering that question, you actually have to take a step back. I always believe in attempting to answer that sort of question, you need to almost do an anthropological study on behavior. Because the behavior in terms of, number one, not of the marketplace, the industry, and the multi-sectoral and multilateral players involved need to be well understood. Now, why do I say this? Now, the core aspect of my job is policy reform. So in order to policy reform, we must have a really good understanding of what the behavior of the market is, or what are the current underlying policies that need to actually be replaced. What happens usually during implementation, I find more often than not, is that you implement without reforming what's already in place. So what happens then, you actually have hybrids of systems, or quite a bit of a confusion happening in terms of which applies. So just to explain to you, some of the work we're doing, for example, in Indonesia in policy reform, really involves a very bottom-up sort of engagement where we're trying to get to the very bottom of what are the policies in place that are currently supposedly enabling energy efficient measures. When you investigate that, only then can you then come across or put across recommendations in relation to where you're going. So a lot of the implementation strategies actually come from the administrative reform, for example, that needs to happen at various agencies, energy agencies, but not just energy agencies. Because remember, when we speak about energy, it is not just the energy agency or the energy ministry involved, it's the public works and housing, it's the environment, and of course now with EV, transportation becomes another entity. So it's a bit of a holistic whole of government approach reform that you're looking at. So in answering your question, what is important is to study behavior of the marketplace, the industry, the public sector, and we like to apply what we call the people-centered approach, where we sort of like to carry out a baseline study in relation to where they are at in the context of the energy efficiency measures, and then policy built from there through a multi-sectoral discussion or forum with all those involved.
Great, thank you for that. I think you brought up some very good points, and I'm starting to see some a thread between what everyone is saying in terms of some key points that really are tying policy together, and that is stakeholder engagement, really looking at all of the different stakeholders that are involved, making sure that you have the input from everybody. I mean, energy efficiency is so across sectors that it's incredibly important to have this, as you started by saying, this anthropological view of who's involved and the behaviors that are involved. And I think it's quite important to take into consideration when crafting energy efficiency policy. So I will turn over to Sasha now for the same question. What are the first things needed to create energy policy and a social environment to implement energy efficiency measures?
Thank you, Jessica. From our perspective, from the Energy Charter Secretariat, one of the most important things in order to get the energy efficiency off the ground is to implement the tariff reforms, which would simultaneously address two issues. From one side, just the countries need to gradually introduce the cost-reflective tariffs. And from this, just another point is that the countries should provide an efficient and adequate protection for vulnerable consumers. So what we've seen what we've learned from our cooperation with correct countries, that those who benefit from the low, or I would say not cost-reflective tariffs, are not the vulnerable consumers with 100 kilowatt hours consumption per month, but those consumers with large houses, lots of appliances with a much higher consumption. I will just give you a very straightforward and simple example from our recent in-depth energy efficiency review of Uzbekistan. So based on the International Energy Agency data, Uzbekistan, just provided the fossil fuel subsidies for its consumers to keep the tariffs low, less than the cost. Energy efficiency is about the amount of the fossil fuel subsidies were at the level of $60 billion over the last 10 years. At the same time, EBRD, and we have the representative here, and the government of Japan helped the government of Uzbekistan to develop the roadmap for the net zero transition of its energy sector. And the total amount of investments needed for Uzbekistan to move just to the net zero carbon dioxide emissions from the energy sector is $94 billion US dollars over the next 30 years. So over the last 30 years, government provided 60 billion in subsidies, for which benefited not the vulnerable, but the wealthy consumers. And from another point of view, that amount, just were about 60% of the total investments needed, just for the country to move on with the energy transition. So I will stop here, and two things, just important, just cost-reflective tariffs and the adequate protection of the vulnerable consumers. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Jeswynn. You mentioned demand-side management and this idea of flexibility. And so I'm wondering if you have examples of best practices, in particular looking at policy that has either hindered or helped the implementation of demand-side management and flexibility measures when looking at incorporating energy efficiency measures.
Thank you, Jessica. Here, I would like to know, to be honest, and refer to our Green Cities program. And I would like to say that it's quite kind of important program, and also for the bank and for the municipalities, because this program allows for coordinated and planned approach towards energy efficiency and demand side management, and working at the level of municipalities and trying to work kind of, at the city level, and working on all the infrastructure of the cities. And from this perspective, I would like to say that the consultants, when developing this, the action plan, the investment program for the city, then they look on what's doable and what is measurable, what could lead to visible and measurable results. And from this perspective, for example, in Central Asia region, we have a number of cities who joined this program and currently developing their investment plans in order to manage this demand side. For example, in terms of the heating, starting with the simplest one, insulation of buildings, in order to keep the warmth and to reduce losses of heat. Or, for example, if we are speaking about the electricity consumption, introduction of electric buses, for example, or trolley buses, in order to reduce emissions from diesel engine buses, etc. So from this perspective, I would like to say that it's really important to ensure that there is a complex view and there is a strategic view which includes views from different perspectives and from the perspective of different stakeholders, in which would enable to develop this robust program for the municipality in order to deal with this. Because it's really kind of, energy efficiency, it starts with everyone, with each and every household, and going into the kind of, into the enterprise level, industrial level. So I would like to say that it's really important, and it's important to build this enabling environment when at the governmental, the regulatory level, there is a set of incentives and the systems enabling this investment, and at the same time, then afterwards, there is sufficient support and incentive at the demand side, on the implementation side, in order to provide these tools in order to achieve these goals set by this program. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, thank you. That was very insightful. So it was great to get that vision of demand side response and demand side management in terms of energy efficiency, because I think it's a used but emerging topic still within the world of energy efficiency, and I think a very important one to further and to go into next steps. So my next question is for the entire group. Everyone here is coming from a very international background, international organizations and international partnerships. So with that, I wanted to hear from each of you what you think international partnerships could be doing more of, and what the role should be. There's a lot of very positive examples. So it could be a continuation of certain programs, a deeper look at certain things, and really where there's room for improvement or maybe gaps that could be covered in terms of international work that's currently happening. So I will go in the order we started with and start with Joy.
Thank you. This is a wonderful question. The short answer here is we wanted to see them working together. It's actually very simple. it actually, even in the government agency and the current organization, the human society are not designed in the way to encourage partnership and collaboration. Think about each of the department, each of the individual sectors, the way they're working is almost in their own silo. So how much they could learn from each other, how much they are willing to step forward from their boundary and to address a little bit more of other industries' concern and to find that integration is what we really wanted to see that happen. So that's why from the World Green Building Council perspective, we really hope to really create this mindset change so that it's a human movement moving together. It's not one discipline or one organization's problem. So that's why we are facing something that the human society have never faced before. Same as the pandemic, we don't know how to address this. But the moment we see something is happening, there's already no national, there's no border. When the viruses strike us, everyone gets the same. When the climate change or any disaster come in, doesn't matter which country you come from, you will get affected by this. So that's why in the way that we wanted to see a mindset shift, we want to see that the people are more willing to step forward and support each other. And also the things that create this kind of partnership. Thank you so much.
I'm muted. Thank you very much. Yeah, I absolutely agree in this collaboration, and not just internationally, but within organizations and within departments and within governments. It's an incredibly important point. And now I will move on. Who was our next speaker? Paul.
Thanks very much, Jesse. Yeah, I'll be pretty quick on from the United Nations perspective. Of course, the global energy transition cannot be done by one country or one region alone. So the international cooperation is key at all levels. And just to say, of course, the benefits of energy efficiency and having an energy efficiency first approach are very significant. The economic benefits, environmental benefits, social benefits, energy security, electricity affordability, industrial competitiveness, all these things are important for every single country, and there are really a lot of experiences from the international community that can be shared. There are a lot of countries, even in the region, with no or poor minimum energy performance standards, ineffective or outdated regulations and policies, and many have grossly under-resourced national and regional energy efficiency programs. So I suppose in terms of cooperation, what we would see is regional energy efficiency programs are really effective. And this is, of course, not just for our eco-efficient appliances side, but also for all of the other energy efficiency target areas, transport, industry. So everybody can benefit in the region from the experience of everyone else in the region. The standards from our perspective, we can really accelerate the transition with international expertise and harmonize standards across a region so that the countries can cooperate and they can have much faster implementation, much faster benefit, and including financing resources to replicate projects that work in the region. And I mentioned the green public procurement practices of governments can share their experience. So the international cooperation, absolutely key, of course. And from our experience, it really does deliver. You can see the very successful regions like European Union with their energy efficiency regulations and many other examples like that the region could successfully follow, just to mention a few.
That's incredibly useful. Thank you. I think the sharing of best practices for sure, and even just conferences like this where we're able to hear about what's happening in other regions, what's happening in this region, I think is incredibly valuable and really highlights the role of international cooperation and partnerships. That said, I will, Sasha, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. How we see it from the Energy Charter Secretariat, and based on our latest, just analysis and the studies, what we have identified that there is a huge gap between the investments in energy efficiency, and I would like to say, just more widely, just sustainable energy needed to achieve the 1.5 degrees scenario and the current investment in sustainable energy. So what we would like to see is that we would like to see the more international cooperation on the facilitation of investments and more cooperation on the protection of the foreign direct investments in sustainable energy and to de-risking and the mitigation of potential risks. So why specifically foreign direct investments? So based on our studies, we have also identified that the foreign direct investments may not only bring the money to the country, but with the foreign direct investments, it usually comes the technological transfer. It's also, just comes the highest number of the jobs created for this country. So by doing and promoting the foreign direct investments and the cooperation on the foreign direct investments, we are killing, just two birds with one stone, which is we're helping countries to achieve their social goals. We're bringing the investment, the technological transfer, and the money needed to achieve the transition. Thank you.
Absolutely. Very well said. So thank you. Those were some very interesting points, and trying to keep track of all of the points today. I'll be excited to go back and re-listen to the conversation and take note of, some very concrete examples that you all are giving. And Jeswynn, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, I mean that this development institution, which was established to support market economies and transition to market economies, we strongly believe in the strengths of the market and entrepreneurial initiative. And from this perspective, I think that the most important is we should build this enabling regulatory base which would allow this initiative to flourish and to deliver. And from this perspective, I think that it's really needed to jointly with development institutions, developed countries, we should support financially and technically, sharing this experience, how this could be achieved in the way how, and kind of, supporting this through the process, through the implementation process. So from our EBRD perspective, we have three key medium-term goals which we are working along. It's green, digital, and inclusive. And I think that all of them, they just echo on the energy efficiency, because working all together and implementing all the recent new technologies like artificial intelligence, data-driven management, etc., we can make this planet greener and sustainable for all of us. And despite the fact that we might be based in Australia or in Central Asia or somewhere in Europe or in Americas. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, those are very good points. And I think, hearing that the very simple three goals of the EBRD of green, digital, inclusive is, I think, sort of a tagline that should be kept in mind, I think, when crafting policy and when really establishing what we're working on in terms of energy efficiency and creating energy efficiency policy, or really any environmental policy. And finally, Jess, over to you.
Thank you. I think the few points I'd like to sort of note here is, number one, leveraging. I think leveraging is a really good place to start with all the international organizations, just so there's no overlapping, but also really there's sharing of information. I mean, one of the critical things we note when we do work on the ground in country is the data, the lack of data. But many of the different organizations working on different aspects of energy. So we work in buildings, for example. Appliances has a very sort of core connection to what we do. So the data in terms of appliances to buildings is critical in terms of the overall, from a residential house perspective. So that sort of leveraging is really important. So to do a bit of a mapping in relation to those synergies are critical in terms of getting the right data. Because remember, without the right data, we can't really measure the energy efficiency context. Number two, there has to be a real sense of reallocation of capital in an equitable way. We note that the capital injection in relation to this space sometimes is targeted in particular jurisdictions only. So there's a real need to look into the reallocation of capital. But more, for example, it's really commendable in terms of what ADB has done recently, where you've invested with Indonesia and Philippines, and you had an MOU, and to the extent of even having that MOU with the local Exco PLN in Indonesia. That shows real traction in terms of how you're sort of trying to make things work through the smart meter program, perhaps. So for me, that's a great breakthrough. aside from that, there should be better joint ventures in terms of how we share technology. And the cost of patent is a big thing. It sort of inhibits because it increases the cost of how we sort of trying to use these technologies. So some understanding in relation to patent, also trade facilitation agreements in terms of logistics is really important to look into, because that's again, there's a way of minimizing the use of energy through trade facilitation agreements, but also then the harmonization of tariffs that we're trying to sort of, I guess, achieve in the context of appliances, for example, and also harmonization in terms of labeling is something we need to think about in terms of how we advocate that from a government to government perspective. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And I'm really glad you brought up data and technology and the sharing here, because I think it's a key point. And unfortunately, we didn't have time to delve into it today, but I think data collection, data sharing is something that we're seeing very differently across the globe and in different regions. And it's very important to see, the role that plays and really does underpin policy evaluation and what we need to be doing going forward. So thank you for that. Sorry, was someone? Oh, no, okay. So we're nearing our close here. We got 4 minutes left. So I really would just like to hear from each of you in 30 seconds or less, sort of what your one key takeaway message from today's session is and what you would like to leave the audience with. And I will go in reverse order this time, and we'll start with you, Jess. You're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. So my message is that energy efficiency measures must be viewed from local to global perspectives that are led by the electrification revolution with an urgency for digital technology distribution and future-ready governance standards, informed by data-driven and nature-based solutions, scaled through public, private, and social sector partnerships and capital JVs, supported by effective administrative reforms, governance standards, knowledge management, societal adjustments, and diversification of capital and financing structures, and finally liberalized by trade facilitation agreements and tariff and patent concessions to lower the cost of these technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a lot. That was perfect. Yerlin, over to you.
Just after you, it's really difficult to add anything. But yeah, really, it's kind of, I want to reiterate, planning, it's important. We should take into account the data. The digital solutions, they always, and we see now how they are changing our lives. What it used to be kind of, spending years, now it's in hours and in seconds. So from this perspective, it's really important. And we should include as many stakeholders in the process as possible. It is a complex solution, and only all together we would be able to find the most optimal solution, because it's not something what could be done overnight, but at the same time we should focus on certain things, low-hanging fruit, which would be able to bring us to the better world right now. And for example, like mentioned this green cities, emissions trading systems, etc., etc. Building an incentive and an environment. I trust really in the people and the initiative. We would be able to work together in order to achieve this target. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And we've got a minute and a half left, so we'll be quick. Sasha, over to you.
Thank you. I'll be quite quick. Just I really like Erlan's message, just regarding the low-hanging fruits. And I think, just it's quite relevant, just we would like to take the energy efficiency off the ground. So from my point, it's the right combination of cost-reflective tariffs and adequate protection of energy poor is key. And the energy cooperation on the foreign direct investments, it's crucial. So thank you.
Excellent. And Paul, to you.
Very much, Jesse. Yeah, just to be quick as well, we calculated the consumer savings available in the region at more than 100 billion annually, just from the 5 appliance projects that United for Efficiency covers. So it's a really major regional opportunity. And we urgently need many more effective, market-focused transformation programs that are strategic, funded by government, supported by the financial sector. These are absolutely critical for the billions of people in the region to take advantage of the savings that are available. And just we're very happy to support that. Government procurement, critical as well. We see this as a really big opportunity for governments to procure only the higher efficiency products in the market. Thank you very much, Jess.
Excellent. Thank you. And Joy.
Right. Since I'm the last one and everyone already said most of the things, I definitely everything agree. I will end up with a lighter note, which is also aligned with the energy efficiency. If you are going to lose weight during the holiday season, the most effective thing for you to eat is to eat less, exercise, or the last resort for you is to take the supplements. So same thing, in order to minimize the energy, demand less, look after your efficiency, and only use the offset and any booster as the last result. Thank you so much.
I love that. It's an excellent note to end on. Thank you all for joining today. It's been a pleasure moderating this session, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.